In 1982, the world was introduced to a cute little girl in a terrifying house. Poltergeist gave us the vision of quiet suburbia interrupted. But whose vision was it exactly? And why is its legacy forever tied to premature deaths, on-set controversies, director disputes, and a curse? The devil is in the details, and that's what we're exploring on this episode of Production Tales from Hell. Hey everyone, it's your Twisted Woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson, and welcome to Production Tales from Hell, where we dive into all the fire and brimstone it took to make the horror films we know and love, and in some cases, the darkness that followed after their releases. In this episode, we'll be focusing on perhaps one of the spookiest filmmaking stories in popular culture, Poltergeist 1982. There are 5 circles of film hell: development, production, post-production, distribution, and perhaps the most dreaded, limbo. Poltergeist flirted with the devil in both development and production hell, and has been in bed with the Dark Lord ever since it was distributed over 3 decades ago. In other words, it's been in a very long-term relationship with creepiness. And we're in a very long-term relationship with WeTransfer, who are our partner for all of Production Tales from Hell. With over 80 million people using WeTransfer every month, it's a proven solution to prevent your own production hell. Picture this. After months and months of pre-production, you and your friends have finally gotten your indie film into production. But there's one problem. You can't afford to bring your whole team to the shooting location. While you're on location in the Bay Area, your writer is in Los Angeles, your editor is in Michigan, and your producer is in New York. How will everyone keep tabs on the latest footage? And how will you make sure everyone has your writer's most up-to-date script? That's where WeTransfer comes in. With the ability to send large files all over the world, you can keep your team in sync on the daily footage, making sure everyone has eyes on the project. Now, the writer can easily make script adjustments. The editor can make sure they have all the coverage they need. And the producer can make sure things are on track. And we like WeTransfer so much, we're using it to share exclusive experiences with you. Go to the link in our description to access a commentary track with me, James, and Chauncey for each of the movies we've covered on Production Tales, as well as a zine featuring exclusive art. Poltergeist is a 1982 supernatural horror film set in the American suburbs. The film focuses on a family who lives in a housing community built on questionable land as they deal with sinister ghosts who invade their home and abduct their clairvoyant young daughter. The film would go on to spawn 2 sequels, a novel, and a 2015 remake. Starring Jo Beth Williams, Craig T. Nelson, Heather O'Rourke, Dominique Dunn, and Beatrice Straight, Poltergeist was produced by Steven Spielberg and directed, depending on who you ask, by Tobe Hooper. More on that later. The movie was a box office success, gaining several awards, including Oscar nominations. Many scenes would forever be imitated and referenced for years to come. Poltergeist could have been a joyous tale of a horror movie showcasing the mainstream appeal of the genre, but unfortunately, that's not where this story ends. Fun and super weird fact. Poltergeist initially wasn't going to be about evil spirits, but about dangerous aliens from outer space. In the early 80s, American film director, producer, and screenwriter Steven Spielberg was quickly rising in the ranks of the Hollywood industry. Spielberg was coming off of the success of Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was filming E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1981 when he decided he wanted to do a follow-up to Close Encounters called Night Skies. Columbia Pictures wanted a Close Encounters sequel as well, but even though Spielberg wasn't interested in directing it, he also didn't want a sequel made without his control. This led to the filmmaker coming up with an idea based on the true story of the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, where a Kentucky family claimed that they had been terrorized by gremlin-like aliens. This is where Tobe Hooper enters the picture. By this time, Hooper was already known for the horror classic and one of my personal faves, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was filming the slasher The Funhouse when Spielberg approached him to collaborate on Night Skies. Hooper initially turned down the science fiction-leaning story and instead told Spielberg he had a more supernatural movie in mind. In a 1982 interview with Fangoria, Hooper explained,
"My interest in ghosts and poltergeists goes back to when I was still living in Texas. It was shortly after my father's death, about 2 days after, the drinking glasses in the kitchen all exploded and shattered. Just various ceramic souvenirs we had had on a shelf flew across the room and broke. The water glasses were replaced and they exploded again a day later. So, I did very much believe that there's an energy that can manifest itself that's beyond our hearing and sight."
When Night Skies was eventually abandoned and left in development hell, Spielberg and Hooper moved forward with Poltergeist, where some elements of Night Skies would eventually find their way into the film. According to Hooper, his story idea was one he had been working on for years before he was approached by Spielberg. But according to Spielberg, Poltergeist had been a movie in his head for some time as the flip side to Jaws. I'm sensing we're going to run into problems later here. Contractually speaking, Spielberg was not allowed to direct Poltergeist as he had an agreement with Universal Pictures that he would exclusively be focused on E.T. So the roles were set that Spielberg would produce and Hooper would direct. But during production, those lines would be blurred, resulting in some serious bad vibes. Dangerous toys, human remains, and haunted after hours. Oh my. The filming of Poltergeist was no walk in the park, and many choices made might have sealed its fate as a cursed picture. For instance, according to reports, the skeletons used in the terrifying pool scenes were real human remains. In the VH1 program I Love the 80s, actress JoBeth Williams confirmed that the skeletons were real.
I would have to go into this huge tank of mud with these skeletons, which, by the way, I thought were plastic, but later found out they were, in fact, real skeletons.
Poltergeist's assistant prop master, Bruce Casson, would later confirm that the human remains were bought cheaply from the medical and science supply company Carolina Biological. The assistant prop master reasoned that replica skeletons did not exist back in the 80s as far as he remembered. Craig Reardon, a special effects makeup artist for the film, would later defend the choice to use human remains as well. He reasoned that genuine human skeletons had been used in many films, such as House on Haunted Hill and Frankenstein in the past. And of course, he added that they were cheaper than constructing props. Well, if you're an actor who never makes it in Hollywood, I guess you could donate your body to Tinseltown instead of science. Winning, but also still dead. The creepiness factor doesn't stop there, as cast and crew reported strange happenings during filming that felt like dark omens. JoBeth Williams, who kept spilling all the tea regarding Poltergeist, told E! True Hollywood Story years ago that she would return home from set every night to find that something had tilted all the pictures in her home.
I began to think, is somebody trying to send me a message that I shouldn't be doing this film?
Zelda Rubinstein, who played the psychic Tangina and who also claimed to be a psychic in real life, said that while filming, she had a vision in which her dog came to her and said goodbye. Later that day, a family member called to tell her that her beloved pet had passed away. And when things weren't creepy, they got downright dangerous, as evidenced by the infamous tale of how actor Oliver Robbins, who played Robbie, was attacked by the toy clown in the film. Yes, he gets attacked within the movie, but allegedly the mechanical prop choked the young boy for real. The story goes that Hooper and Spielberg thought he was only acting during the choking scene. But when Robin's face began turning purple, the filmmakers rushed over to remove the clown's hands from around his neck. At a press event years later, when asked about the attack, Robbins neither confirmed nor denied it. He's quoted as saying, "Maybe that did happen, but I can't remember. Maybe I blocked it out of my conscious mind." And here's a bonus dangerous event. James Caan, who wrote the novelization of the Poltergeist movie, told a story of a freak incident that happened to him right after finishing the novel. A lightning bolt struck the building he was working in. Caan explains, "The facing on the air conditioning unit blew off, flew across the room, and hit me in the back. Then the lights flickered and went on. And then all the video games in the room started playing themselves." Personally, I'm still blaming it on using real skeletons. This is where the real drama begins. Whose vision was Poltergeist? Hooper or Spielberg? When Poltergeist was first released, it was during what Hollywood called the Summer of Spielberg. Mainstream media and the film studio MGM put Spielberg in the spotlight, leaving director Tobe Hooper out in the cold, even though Hooper was the actual director. Interview after interview focused on Spielberg as the creative visionary behind Poltergeist. A New York Times write-up of the film, which included quotes by Spielberg, didn't even mention Hooper, and Spielberg, at the time, didn't seem to push back against this narrative. Spielberg stated in one interview, weeks before the film's release,
"All I can say about my involvement overall is, I wrote the movie. I actually wrote Poltergeist, but co-authored an earlier draft with Michael Grace and Mark Victor, who were credited as co-writers. I hired them to realize my original idea. From the storyboards to the post-production of this movie, I functioned in a very strong way."
As would be expected, this caused some tension. John Kenneth Muir's 2009 book, Eaten Alive at a Chainsaw Massacre, the films of Tobe Hooper, speculates that Hooper believed a Los Angeles Times reporter who was on set saw Hooper shooting with the first unit, the team that films key footage for the film, and Spielberg handling the second unit, the team responsible for shooting additional footage or establishing shots, and inferred that maybe Spielberg was more involved as a director than initially believed. Things got so testy that the Directors Guild of America, which determines credits, launched an investigation. They then ordered that the film's distributor, MGM, pay Hooper $15,000 for failing to properly credit him in the Poltergeist promotional materials. Cast members came forth adding their thoughts as well. While a majority of the cast asserted that Hooper had been their director, Zelda Rubinstein's testimony went the opposite direction. The self-proclaimed psychic actress told Ain't It Cool News,
"I can tell you that Steven directed all 6 days I was there. Toby set up the shots and Steven made the adjustments. You're not gonna hear that from Tobe Hooper, you'll hear it from Zelda, because that was my honest-to-God experience."
She would later mention that she sensed, psychically of course, that Hooper was on drugs during the filming of the movie. Damn, Zelda. Later, Spielberg would seemingly regret the part he played in diminishing Hooper's role in the Poltergeist narrative. He penned an open letter that was published in The Hollywood Reporter on June 2nd, 1982, stating,
"I enjoyed your openness in allowing me, as a producer and a writer, a wide berth for creative involvement, just as I know you were happy with the freedom you had to direct Poltergeist so wonderfully. Through the screenplay, you accepted a vision of this very intense movie from the start, and as the director, you delivered the goods. You performed professionally and responsibly throughout, and I want to wish you great success on your next project."
Although Spielberg seemingly squashed the beef, and Hooper years later would refer to his former producer as a friend, many movie lovers still debate who the film truly belongs to, casting a shadow over Hooper's creative genius. Artistic battles aside, perhaps the most haunting details adding to the Poltergeist legacy are the premature deaths of cast members. Dominique Dunne, who played the older sister Dana, was killed 5 months after Poltergeist was released. The actress was murdered by her ex-boyfriend John Thomas Sweeney. Sweeney, who refused to allow Dunne to end their romantic relationship, strangled her after a fight. The young actress would slip into a coma that she would never wake up from. She was 22 years old. Sweeney's lawyers argued that he had attacked Dunne in a fit of passion. He was found guilty of homicide and sentenced to just 6 years in prison. He served less than that since his pre-conviction, pre-trial prison time was subtracted from his sentence. Perhaps the real horror story is that Sweeney only served 4.5 years for Dunne's tragic murder. Heather Michelle O'Rourke, who played the central character of Carol Ann in the entire original trilogy, tragically passed away in 1988 from congenital stenosis of the intestine complicated by septic shock. Her condition had gone undetected and misdiagnosed for some time. O'Rourke died 4 months before the release of Poltergeist 3. She was only 12 years old. Lou Perriman, who played one of the construction workers in Poltergeist, and who was also featured in Texas Chainsaw 2, was murdered in 2009 by Seth Tatum in Texas. Tatum, having suffered a psychotic break, knocked on Perriman's door at random, invaded his home, and hacked Perriman to death with an axe. These deaths, and those associated with cast members who appeared in later films, have only added to the lore of Poltergeist as a so-called cursed film. Despite hellish conditions and a dark legacy, Poltergeist still stands as an iconic and even family-friendly horror film. The controversies surrounding it don't detract from its quality. One could argue that all the drama, danger, and haunting stories have contributed to solidifying its place in popular culture. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And in this case, a pretty great movie. I'm Chauncey K. Robinson, and this has been Production Tales from Hell. Stay creepy out there.